Greetings, my fellow freedom lovers and sovereign thinkers. This is LL3's newest podcast. My name is Craig, transmitting from the north central regions of Utah, which is also known as the Beehive State, in a city called Roy, which is in Ogden section, which is north of Salt Lake City. And today I'm going to be doing some cool little topics. And this one is from part 1 and 2 of the totalitarian stuff and all that good stuff, all this interesting goodies. So, first one I'm going to be reading today came from the Daily Sheeple. Came out today to be exact. It's called Broke. Need a job? The government will pay you $7,000 a month to foster illegal immigrants. Pretty interesting there, right, my friends? Oh, yeah, that's what they want to do. Okay, as it reads here. It's getting progressively harder to find a good-paying job these days in America, or a job at all. Just ask the 20% of American families where everyone is unemployed. Well, if you need some extra cash, the government is currently offering up to $7,400 a month to foster illegal immigrants. Today, Breitbart reported that some of these immigrants the U.S. government is paying American families to foster are even adults. The Texas-based nonprofit Catholic Charities is currently seeking out foster families for the migrants, most of whom came from Central America. Ruth Brazier, a spokeswoman for the organization, told Breitbart, Texas, that foster families can receive monthly payments of housing adult immigrants who are under 23 years old. Most of our children are 15 to 17 years old, she said, but some stay in our program until they are 22 years old. If they're still working on getting their high school diploma, they can stay until they're that age. The revelation that some of the migrants receiving foster care are adults will likely come as a surprise to many. The mainstream media is largely portrayed the border crisis as involving only children and family units. Brazier mentioned that foster families will be paid $40 per day for each migrant they take in from the Catholic Charities. The payments are funded by the federal government, as Breitbart, Texas previously reported. Let's just take that little glimpse there. The link's on there, and Breitbart has its pros and cons like everybody else, but remember always to observe responsibly. And they do have the article on that. Okay, can we say bribery, my friends? Bribery. And I say that with love and in good faith. And we will proceed. Because a foster family is allowed to keep and care for up to 6 individuals at any given time, the potential stand make $7,400 a month, more than most Americans earn at their jobs these days, considering more than half of all U.S. wage earners make less than $30,000 a year. Brazier told Breitbart that the illegal immigrants also receive taxpayer-subsidized education, health care, transportation, and allowance. Hooray for big government. Bow down to your masters. It's only a pipe dream, my friends. A posting, a well-founded aid to unaccompanied minor immigrants on the Catholic Charities website relays the program's services in detail. Our program partners with foster families to provide a safe, nurturing, and culturally sensitive environment that equips and empowers them to reach their full potential. IFC provides services to meet the needs of each youth. These services include tutoring, mentoring, independent living skills training, cultural activities, legal assistance, mental health services, intensive case management and education ESL classes. Again, this is magically funded by the federal government. We do have a border crisis, but don't worry, it's not as if this is all part of the dedicated systematic Cloward-Piven strategy to topple the system or anything. So where's all the money coming from? Who cares? If you need some cash or can't find a job, take a cue from the good old Uncle Sam and never let a good crisis go to waste. Catholic Charities Fort Worth will be holding free informational sessions for becoming an illegal immigrant foster family on July 31st, which is a couple of days from now, and August 14th. Well. Can we say tyranny or bribery? Or how about extortion? I'm not going around bashing immigrants. That will be irrelevant. But how I see what the illegals that are coming in here are being used as pawns for the tyrant's personal gain. They don't care about them. They're being used and manipulated like it did happen in those other regions. And that's what's dangerous. That's one thing you have to really look at. Truth of the matter is, they're being all used as bellboys, and bellboys, bellgirls, and numbers. That's what it all comes down to. I believe there's people I knew that came from Central America. As I repeated in the last couple episodes, they've earned their merits, credibility. They did not depend on government handouts. It is treacherous to a free society. It doesn't matter what you look like or what your national background is. Even if you're a white Anglo-Saxon, I treat them all the same. I love it in good faith. So, just got to do a little homework. And how I see this is just another example of the Club of Rome 101, which the North American Union is part of their agenda. All right. Next one here, my friends, is going to be from Paul Craig Roberts, and it's entitled, Israel is Stealing and Murdering Its Way Through Palestine, which came out today. The Moral Failure of the West, Paul Craig Roberts wrote. Readers are asking for my take on the Israel-Gaza situation, and believe it or not, Oxford University's famous debate society, the Oxford Union, invited me to debate the issue. I replied to the Oxford Union that I was unprepared to take responsibility for the Palestinians without undergoing the extensive preparation that an Oxford Union debate deserves and requires. Unless things have changed since my time at Oxford, one prevails in a union debate by anticipating every argument of one's opponent and smashing the arguments with humor and wit. Facts seldom, if ever, carry the day, and sometimes not even wit and humor if the audience is already committed to the outcome by the prevailing propaganda. There is no time or energy in my overfilled schedule for such preparation, plus away and jet lag. Moreover, I'm not an expert on Israel's conquest and occupation of Palestine. I know more than most people. I was rescued from Zionist propaganda by Israeli historians such as Ian Pappe, by Jewish intellectuals such as Noam Chomsky and Norman Finkelstein, by documentary filmmakers such as John Pilger, by Israeli journalists such as Yuri Avnery and the Israeli newspaper Haaretz, and by an Israeli house guest who is an Israeli member of an Israeli peace group that opposes Israeli destruction of Palestine homes, villages, and orchards in order to build apartment blocks for settlers. There is only one take on the current Israeli slaughter of Palestinians, which Netanyahu, the demonic Israeli leader, declares will be a protracted campaign this time. We are witnessing yet again Israeli war crimes that are supported by the great moral West. Is that so concerned about the deaths of 290 passengers on MH17 that they are about to drive the world to a major war, while Palestinian casualties pile up so fast that they are out of date by the time you put the numbers in a column. So far, more than 1,200 deaths with injuries to 2,000 children, 1,170 women, and 257 elderly. Reading the Western media, watching Western TV, and listening to Western radio, one is left with the propaganda that the Palestinians are to blame for the Israeli attack on Gaza. Just as one is left with the propaganda that the Malaysian airliner's deaths are Russia's fault. There is no evidence, but propaganda does not require evidence, just repetition. The Gaza Strip, a ghetto full of Palestinians evicted from their homes and villages in the West Bank, is one of the most densely populated areas on earth where life with scant resources is difficult. Israel is currently in the process of shrinking Gaza Gaza by 44%. And Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, a Democrat, is preparing another emergency aid package consisting of U.S. tax dollars to finance Israel's slaughter and compression of Palestinian lives. And that links on the Daily Beast and Information Clearinghouse and antiwar.com. And I have to say this, will Harry Reid go on the front line and fight for the demoniacs? He's nothing more than a chicken hawk, and our tax dollars should never be there, period. That includes all foreign aid. And anyone wants to get mad at me on it, go right ahead, because I don't care. And I say that with honor. One would think that the Great Moral West would be discussing sanctions on Israel and on Washington's stooge government in Kyiv, which is bombing civilian homes, apartment complexes, and infrastructure in provinces where the people object to the Russia-phobic government installed by Washington in place of the one that they elected. But the Great Moral West only aids the perpetrators of death and destruction, not the victims. Palestinians are also being dispossessed and exterminated exactly as were the Native American Indians. On occasion, Israeli officials have said that they are only following America's lead in clearing the land of undesirables. This is my take on what is one of the West's great moral failings. Israel is stealing and murdering its way through Palestine. I think that's... Oh, I gotta proceed here. Hold on. Sorry about that. As Zionists have endeavored to teach the world for decades, Israel is not subject to criticism. Only Jew haters and anti-Semites and people who want to gas Jews and boil them in oil criticize Israel. Israel is above criticism because Israelis are God's chosen people, and despite being God's chosen people, suffered the Holocaust. I would say to those people with that mindset, if you believe you're God's chosen people and you're the only ones that suffer the Holocaust, can you explain to me about why like 170 million people got slaughtered by the hands of tyrannical governments? You kind of call that a picnic on genocide? And of course about 270 million on democide. Is that a picnic, or that's just an exception for one particular group? I say hell no. This means that the Israeli government, like the one in Washington, can do whatever it wants and remain above criticism. Since the 1940s, Zionists have been stealing Palestine from the Palestinians. The majority of Palestinians have been removed from their homes and their country. They exist in refugee camps and others, and 1.5 million are concentrated in the Gaza ghetto, which is blockaded by Israel on one end and by the Washington-paid Egyptians on the other. This makes it convenient for Israel from time to time to attack the civilian population and civilian infrastructure in Gaza with military force. So far in Israel's latest war crime, Israel has murdered more than 1,200 Palestinians, largely women and children. You seldom see the photos of destruction in the American media, but RT provides a few glimpses, which is Russia Today. And like I said, I'm not crazy about them either, but they have their good and bad as everyone else. Observe responsibly. Just look through that link. Israel is always the aggressor, but always takes the role of the victim. Palestinian women and children are all subhumans, snakes, as one Israeli politician put it, who sneaks into Israel through secret tunnels, whose existence in akin to Saddam Hussein's weapons of mass destruction, wearing suicide bomb belts and blow up innocent Israelis along with themselves, while Israelis sit in cafes peacefully discussing philosophical issues and the latest news. Top the slaughter of innocent Israelis, Israel has to blow up Palestinian hospitals, schools, civilians, and apartment blocks. Well, one politician is saying that they're a bunch of snakes. Probably one of his favorite book is Mein Kampf by Adolf Hitler, huh? Something to think about, my friends. These unmistakable war crimes, these crimes against humanity, are all ignored by the great moral arbiters of the world, the governments of the West, who are shaking their fingers not at Israel but at their fists at Russia. Can we say double standards? The Western government ignores Israel's war crimes, but not all Western people comply with this neglect. Many thousands of demonstrators against Israel have been in the streets of South America, London, Paris, Germany, Dublin, and Israel's own Tel Aviv. And there's a link for that too. But I've seen those past videos and links as well, so I have to respect that. But don't look for much reporting of these demonstrations in the American Press Institute media. The American prostitute media is focused on those who died in the downing of the Malaysian airliner in eastern Ukraine in order to blame those 290 deaths on Russia. As far as the American prostitute media is concerned, the murder of 1,200 Palestinian deaths is not happening, or if it is, the Palestinians deserve it for responding to Israel's oppression by firing in frustration primitive rockets that seldom ever hit their targets. What is another 1,200 murdered Palestinians? Who cares? Not the Washington or the British PM in Whitehall, and certainly not the Israelis. As far as Israel and the Great Moral West is concerned, 1,200 murdered Palestinians amount to nothing. They are not even chafing in the wind. Sorry about that. Last time Israel attacked civilians in Gaza, a distinguished Israeli jurist, himself a Zionist, prepared a case for the UN that Israel had committed war crimes. On Israel's orders, the craven but very obedient U.S. Congress passed a resolution denouncing the distinguished jurist for defaming the pure and innocent Israeli government. The pressure from Washington and Israel on the jurist broke his commitment to truth, and he retracted his findings. This is what the Israel lobby and the craven American prostitute do to everyone who criticizes Israel's crimes against humanity and Washington's protection of Israel's crimes. Anytime you see a person attacked by the Israel lobby, you know for certain that person's under attack is the salt of the earth. The distinctive mark of a moral human being is to be attacked by the Israel lobby and the prostitute American media. While Israel murders Palestinians in Gaza with attacks on hospitals, schools, and civilian apartment blocks, Washington and his puppets in Kyiv attack civilians in apartment blocks in the former Russian provinces of Ukraine who object to Washington's overthrow of the democratically elected government in Ukraine and Washington's installation of a Russophobic, Russian-hating government in its place. Washington has declared those in Ukraine who object to Washington's takeover of their country to be terrorists and seeking legislation that will permit U.S. troops legally to enter Ukraine to suppress the terrorists. Well, I'll say this. You get all those electric chicken hawks in Washington, instead of having our troops go there, you guys should go there with your suit and ties and your pathetic little dresses and you wear your high heel shoes to see how tough you really are. Because actions speak louder than words. I will proceed here. David Ward, a member of the British Parliament who has the right as a British citizen and member of the Parliament to express his opinion, said if he lived in Gaza under Israeli oppression, he would likely fire a rocket into Israel. The British media and government is to yet criticize Israel for its crimes, but instantly attacked Ward for his vile comments. A conservative member of the Parliament, Nadhim Zahawi, wrote the Metropolitan Police demanding an investigation into Ward's statement as a matter of urgency. The Conservative Party chairman, Grant Shapps, declared Ward's statement to be an incitement to violence, a felony. The Craven Labour Party declared Ward's opinion to be so vile and irresponsible that it defied belief. And there's a link to RT on that as well, with their tweet. The Liberal Democrats, of which Ward is a member, of utterly condemned Ward's remarks and declared that Ward would be a subject to disciplinary hearings and maybe permanently be expelled from the party. How astute of them. There you have it. A member of the Parliament in the country that invented freedom of speech expresses an honest opinion, and he is dead meat. Ward's harmless remarks killed no one. The Israelis, with weapons supplied by Washington, have at this time already murdered more than 1,200 people. But it is Ward who must be restrained, not Israel. Ward's remarks are declared violent and irresponsible, but not Israel's murder of 1,200 people. The U.S. and U.K. pretend to be countries that are not afraid of the truth, where there is free inquiry and freedom of expression, one's views, but is all a great lie. The U.S. and the U.K. are the two greatest threats to free speech on the face of the earth. In the U.K., no truth contrary to the line is permissible. In the U.S., people who speak the truth is to put on the watch list. That's right, the war on terror is a conflict with ourselves. How much longer will the governments of the rest of the world regard the U.S. and U.K. as homes of free speech and uplifting Western mortality? In America, the success of Israeli propaganda, never challenged, of course, by the U.S. media, exceeds the success of Washington's own propaganda. Most Americans believe that Palestinian women and children are outfitted with explosive suicide belts, and that the snakes, as they are described by Israeli politicians, walk into an Israeli cafe and blow up everyone, including themselves. The fact of the matter is that Palestinians cannot get into Israel. Gaza is blockade, as are the few remaining Palestinian settlements in the West Bank. Israel has stolen almost all of Palestine. The few Palestinian settlements still permitted to exist are cut off by a massive wall from Israel and from each other a barbed wire and checkpoints, cut off from hospitals and schools, from water, and from their fields and olive groves, which are being destroyed to make room for settlers' apartment blocks. Can we say progress? Tyrannically speaking. People this hemmed in are helpless, and the extreme right-wing Israeli settlers are moving into the few remaining Palestinian settlements, evicting the Palestinians from their properties with the aid of U.S.-provided Caterpillar tractors, especially designed for uprooting Palestinian olive groves and demolishing Palestinian homes. Just like the Caterpillar tractor that the Israelis ran over U.S. citizens, Rachel Corrie, murdering this protest U.S. citizen in cold blood? Yes, you are correct. The great moral U.S. government did nothing about it. Israel learned when it murdered the crew of the USS Liberty that Israel had carte blanche from Washington to murder citizens. And that I recommend everyone look that up. There are documents on that as well. So just type in YouTube, USS Liberty. There's plenty of videos on that, my friends. And I will proceed. When you view the photos of Palestinians who have undergone an Israeli attack, and what do you see? You see unarmed people crying, hugging dead children in their arms and one another. You never see a resolute of armed people prepared to repel the next Israeli attack. You see devastated hospitals, schools, and apartment complexes, and Palestinians in tears and no weapons. What is striking about the success of Israeli propaganda is its success with all evidence that its Palestinians are pacifists and capable of resistance. The bulk of the people in Gaza are refugees from the West Bank, where their land and homes were stolen by the great democratic state of Israel. The Israeli destruction of Palestine has been going on for almost 7 decades, and still Palestinians are not armed and have no effective military units. After 7 decades, the Palestinian people remain unarmed. Hamas has a few ineffective weapons, but the people themselves are unarmed. Their response to Israeli murders of their children, wives, husbands, brothers, sisters, parents, cousins, and friends is to cry. This is not the response of a warlike people. In the contrast, there are reports that Israeli civilians sit atop the hill, overlook Gaza on sofas that they bring along with their drinks and food to watch in glee, clapping and cheering as Israeli bombs destroy Palestinians in their homes, children in their schools, and the ill in the hospitals. If this is the true face, the only democracy in the Middle East is the face of evil. The view brainwashed into the West that Palestinians are a threat to Israel is absurd. If Palestinians are a threat and a danger to Israel, how is it possible that Palestinians are locked away into sealed ghettos in the remnants of their own country or into refugee camps in foreign countries? As Israel's most distinguished historian, Ilan Pappe, has related, the story of Israel is the story of the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. This story has been hidden by Western moral governments and by corrupt Western media and Christian priests from Western populations that possibly would have objected, but who are now too brainwashed and disinformed to know. Wow. One thing I tell people about governments, they're the most wickedest entity in world history. In Latin, it means control of the mind. And you can probably look at my past archives about the Armenians being slaughtered by the Ottoman Turks and so forth, and I do put stuff on there just by government, gives you a whole rundown. You can even get the book at any bookstore or even Amazon.com. Trust me, you'd be surprised. Too many people want to trust governments, and this is a very poor example. And foreign lobbyists should never influence a country, especially the United States. Just like I said in the past, I stress this again. John Jay warned us about it in Federalist Papers 2 through 5. Look it up and tell all these people they don't like it. Tough. Get out. You're contaminating space. I'm tired of all this slaughtering or democide. Doesn't matter who they are. And I say that with honor. And Israel, the name Israel in Hebrew means struggling with God. And I know that a lot of people who are Israelis are tired of this whole demolition of hatred and control. No one should be treated like garbage. Unless if you're a violent criminal, a habitual criminal. Too many war criminals in the world. We all have them. Even the ones people praise, we have them. And I want to make an attempt to try to get that story on the ethnic cleansing of Palestine as soon as possible. I'm going to make that effort. So bear with me on that, okay? All right, my friends. Next one I'm going to be doing came from Bribert.com. It's the title, San Diego Police Chief, We Can Disarm Americans Within a Generation. Okay, let's see what this clown has to say. San Diego Police Chief William Landon is fully supportive of the Obama-Feinstein gun grab and says if lawmakers play it right, America can be completely disarmed within a generation. I believe this police chief's mentor is Mao Tae-sung, right? This article was written by R. Hawkins. It came out the 28th. Oh, this is old stuff, but 28th January 2013. But you know what? I'm going to put it out there anyway. Why not? And as it reads, Landon has gone on record saying, I could not be more supportive of the president for taking the position he has. I think it's outrageous with politics involved in this process, and I think it's going to eventually make the country safer. Well, he's in a world wet dream. He made it clear that it may take a generation, but new laws could eventually take all guns off the street. This is quite a departure from other law enforcement personnel we've seen around the country, particularly sheriffs, who've come out firmly against any infringement on the Second Amendment rights. And don't forget the Ninth, too. I'm going to add that to natural law. We've cheered those officials for standing with the people, and now Lansdowne has taken a position completely opposite them. Moreover, Lansdowne has also been slammed the NRA in interviews, as he seemed overly thrilled at the money the NRA is being forced to spend to get their message out in the wake of the crime of Sandy Hook Elementary. We broke the NRA, said Lansdowne. I disagree with that chump. Okay, well, that's like a little shorty. But I can tell you one thing about this piece of garbage. Police Chief William Lansdowne from San Diego. You're nothing more than a treasonous quack. And I know you climax over Mao Tae-sung and Joseph Stalin combined. Prove me wrong, old fart. That's all I have to say. I know I shouldn't be using that language, but based on his rhetoric, that's his mentors, what I've addressed aforementioned. And too bad. And the people in California gotta know one thing: the police aren't obligated to protect you as an individual. Don't listen to this clown. I would say this: use his office as an outhouse. He wants to crap on you. Why treat him any differently? Now I'm going to proceed. It is current events now. This came from truthout.org. And this is written by Neha Tara Metha, Moyers and Company. It is just now low pay stressing out part-time workers. It came out today, by the way. Now that reads, besides struggling to make ends meet because of low wages, millions of part-time workers in America also face uncertainty over when they will be called in to work. Irregular schedules and last-minute notices make it hard for these workers to find other work, go to school, make arrangements for childcare, and caring for aging parents. As the New York Times reported last week, about 27.4 million Americans work part-time. The number of those part-timers who prefer to work full-time has nearly doubled since 2007 to 7.5 million. According to a Bureau of Labor Statistics data, 47% of part-time hourly workers ages 26 to 32 received a week or less advance notice for their schedule. In a study of the data, 2 University of Chicago professors found that employers dictated the work schedules for about a half of young adults without their input. For part-time workers, schedules on average fluctuate from 17 to 28 hours a week. Frontline managers face pressure to keep costs down, but they really don't have much control over wages or benefits, said Susan J. Lambert, a University of Chicago professor who interpreted the data. What they have control over is employee hours. According to the National Women's Law Center, food service workers experience a 70% average variation of work hours every month. For retail workers, the variation is 50%. For janitors and housekeepers, is 40%. Lawmakers across the country are beginning to notice how regular schedules complicate the lives of part-time workers and are taking measures to address the problem. Employees of federal agencies now have the right to request work schedule flexibilities. Workers in San Francisco and Vermont can ask for more flexible, predictable work schedule. In a report released in June, New York City Comptroller Scott M. Stringer made a case for legislation that will give employees a chance to make such requests without fear of reprisal. Congress is bringing into action on the issue as well. On Tuesday, Representatives George Miller and Rosa DeLaRue introduced the Schedules at Work Act. Miller admits that the bill may meet with opposition, but thinks it will highlight often countless scheduling practices. The Guardian reports that another version of the bill is brewing in the Senate. Senators Tom Harkins and Elizabeth Warren are co-sponsoring of the Senate's version bill. Kerry Gleason, co-founder of Retail Action Project, said that Warren will introduce a Senate version in the upcoming weeks. A single mom working 2 jobs should know if her hours are being canceled before she arranges for daycare and drives halfway across town to show up at work, said Warren. It is about the same basic fairness in work schedules so that both employees and employers have more certainty and can get the job done. Although some businesses are saying bills would represent government overreach, the clothing store Zara has already promised to start giving its part-time employees 2-week notice on their work schedules. Like I said, it may sound good about these bills, but it's always a fine line in my opinion. One thing I always tell people too, neo-mercantilism, globalism killed a lot of jobs in the United States. NAFTA, GATT, government trying to tell us what they can do, what we can't do. Of course, this, collective bargaining is good. I'm not knocking that at all because I am a union stagehand and I do support it as long as they got the right people to do the job. But what's been going on here? Entrepreneurship is dwindling. People with creative thoughts are being condemned. We got to get rid of all that. And so I recommend you read a book by Thomas J. DiLorenzo called How Capitalism Saved America. Very good book. And people don't think capitalism is bad because they're like brainwashed or compounded what's really been going on. But if you go a little further with governments trying to intervene and a lot of jobs and so forth, and globalism, it takes a huge effect in a period of time. And it's not the Republicans, it's not the Democrats, it's across the board. Okay? So let's get that out of the way. But I like to see part-time workers get treated with respect and dignity because, hey, they're making it happen too. And you got people out there who have families and so forth. I think it's very disturbing. The family structure is being destroyed too by the mind control propaganda as well. And we got to start to learn to really contemplate more thoroughly and go back to the basics of family values and so forth. And you don't need Washington, D.C. or the state capitol to tell you how to do it. It's got to start from each individual like ourselves, myself, and the ones that are listening to the show. But thereafter is a good article. Like I said, Truth Out. They call them progressive and all that, but they got good stuff, and I always give them a lot of good credit. So always observe responsibly. At least you guys try to think about it across the board. All right, this one here came from Florida Watchdog, and it's entitled "Democratic Candidate Gets $225,000 Boost for Sole Super PAC Donor, His Dad." It's from William Patrick, and it's as it reads. Tallahassee, Florida. A congressional candidate in Florida is getting a boost from a super political action committee with one donor, which happened to be his dad. But there's a twist. Gabriel Rothblatt's father, Martine, used to be Martin Rothblatt, before undergoing gender reassignment surgery. She, Martine, founded Cyrus Satellite Radio, a Maryland-based biotech company that paid her $38 million in compensation last year, according to Forbes. There's a link for that. Martin Rothblatt was raised the second highest compensation executive in Washington, D.C. in region in 2007, according to the Washington Post. 8th Congressional District in which Rosenblatt is running includes Kennedy Space Center. Such vast available resources, coupled with elite connections, go a long way toward unseating the incumbent Republican with a little outside name recognition, U.S. Representative Bill Posey. Interesting, Rothblatt's Super PAC is called Space PAC. We are Space PAC, Space Political Affairs Committee, based in Washington, D.C., with primary intent to make man's access to space not a destination but a regular activity, reads the Super PAC's website. Rothblatt is unopposed in a Democratic primary. Entries on the candidate site call for the 21st Century Space Program and accused Pappe of lying about NASA project during the U.S. House Committee on Space, of which Pappe is a member. And it reads here, according to a financial disclosure statement, Space PAC intends to raise funds in unlimited amounts and will not use those funds to make contributions, whether direct, in kind, or via coordinated communications to federal candidates or committees. Records show Martin Rosenblatt contributed $225,000 to Space PAC last quarter. Additionally, Super PAC's treasurer is a former federal regulatory lawyer and now influential attorney associated with the United Therapeutics Corp. Martin Rothblatt's pharmaceutical company. Oh my goodness, this gets bigger by the day, huh? Federal election laws prohibits Super PACs coordinating with candidates, but the close familial ties in this case could easily complicate those restrictions, and already may have. Russ Lemon, a reporter from the area of Treasure Coast Palm, took Rothblatt's task over the Space PAC-funded political signs. First, they are out way too early. Second, they are in places where campaign signs simply aren't allowed, Lemon wrote. But if the candidate's campaign removed the PAC signs, it could constitute an improper coordination, Rosenblatt admitted. Watchdog.org contacted candidate Rothblatt's campaign for comment but did not receive a response. A spokesman for Bill Posey's campaign told Watchdog.org that he was aware of PAC's connect to Rothblatt but declined to comment further. Nearby progressive U.S. Representative Ted Deutsch, the Democrat from Florida, is outspoken critic of Super PACs and unlimited political spending. Deutsch is co-sponsoring a proposed federal constitutional amendment to overturn recent changes in campaign finance laws that allow them. The legislation has support many House Democrats, including former Speaker Nancy Pelosi. The Democracy for All Amendment will reverse highly controversial Supreme Court decisions like Citizens United versus FEC, McCutcheon versus FEC, which have given corporations and wealthiest donors the right to buy unlimited influence in our elections, said Deutsch in a statement. Our electoral democracy is based on the premise that voice of a billionaire is worth more than that of a school teacher, said Deutsch. Rothblatt is endorsed by the Teamsters, a powerful labor union, and the National Organization of Women, a feminist group. District includes Brevard and Indian County Rivers and parts of Orange County. Oh yeah, as the scams play on. It's not a partisan thing whatsoever, my friends, but rather nothing more than just another deception. The truth of the matter is, the federal government should never dictate to the states on how to do things. That's called centralization. That's very treacherous. My answer is to these numbnuts, including Martin Rothblatt and Gabriel Rothblatt. Don't matter to me. Right? You can take your money and stick it, because the truth of the matter, I say this, my friend, you better go by the Constitution, not by your stupid rhetoric or what your buddies have to say, including the ones who bribed you. I don't care if you're a Democrat, I don't care if you're a Republican, etc. That's all I have to say. Government keep out, 10th Amendment style. That's the answer, and people are seeing it. and I commend them for it. But this here, bribery, extortion is the key to so-called their pretentious victory. Well, hopefully it will backfire. All right, I'm going to hit one here from the Burning Platform. Actually, it's a two-part series, 2 parts, and it's very interesting because this is entitled Totalitarian Future, Part 1. And the administrator from here is from burningplatform.com. And I like this quote here. It says, on the first day of Christmas, the population of our planet was about 250 million less than the half the population of modern China. 16 centuries later, when the Pilgrim Fathers landed at Plymouth Rock, human numbers had climbed to a little more than 500 million. By the time of signing the Declaration of Independence, the world population has passed the 700 million mark. In 1931, when I was writing Brave New World, it stood just under 2 billion. Today, only 27 years later, there are 2,800 million of us, and tomorrow what? That's from quote from Aldous Huxley from the Brave New World Revisited. So population is growing, which is logical here. So as it reads, as the world explodes in violence, wars, riots, and uprisings, it's challenging to step back and examine the bigger picture. With airliners being shot down over Ukraine, missiles flying between Israel and Gaza, ongoing civil war in Syria, Iraq falling apart as ISIS gains ground, dictatorship crackdown in Egypt, Turkey on the verge of revolution, Iran getting control of Iraq, Saudi Arabia fomenting violence, Africa dissolving into chaos, South America imploding and sending their children across our purposely porous southern border, Mexico under the control of the drug lords, China experiencing a slow-motion real estate collapse, Japan experiencing their 3rd decade of Keynesian failure, facing a demographic nightmare scenario with being slowly poisoned by radiation, and Chinese-Japanese relations moving towards World War II levels. And it's easy to get lost to the day-to-day minutia of history in the making. Why is this happening at this point of history? Why is the average American economically worse off today than they were at the height of economic crisis in 2009? Why is the Cold War returning with a vengeance? Why is the Federal Reserve still employing emergency monetary policies when we are supposedly 5 years into recovery and the stock market has attained record highs? Why do the ECB and European politicians continue to paper over insolvency of their banks and governments? Why did the U.S. support the ouster of a dictator we support for decades in Egypt, and then support the evolution of a new dictator after we didn't like the policies of a dramatically elected president? Why did the U.S. eliminate the leader of Libya and allow the country to descend into anarchy and civil war? Why did the U.S. find and provoke a revolutionary overthrow of a democratically elected leader in Ukraine? Why did the U.S. fund and arm Al-Qaeda associated rebels in Syria who are now fighting our supposed allies in Iraq? Why has the U.S. been occupying Afghanistan for the last 13 years, with the result being a Taliban that is stronger than ever? Why are the BRIC countries forming monetary unions to challenge USD domination? Why is the U.S. attempting to provoke Russia into a conflict with NATO? Why has the government collecting every electronic communication made by every American? Why is the U.S. government spying on world leader allies? Why is the U.S. government providing military equipment to local police forces? Why is the U.S. military conducting training exercises within U.S. cities? Why is it the U.S. government attempting to restrict Second Amendment rights? Why is it the U.S. government attempting to control and lock down the internet? Why has the U.S. government chosen to treat the Fourth Amendment as if it's obsolete? Why is the national debt still rising by $750 billion per year, $2 billion per day, if the economy is back to normal? Why Why have 12 million working-age Americans left workforce since the economic recovery began? How could the unemployment rate be back in 2008 levels when there are 14 million more working-age Americans and the same number employed as in 2008? Why are 13 million more people on food stamps today than there were at the start of the economic recovery in 2009? Why home prices has risen by 25% since 2012 when mortgage applications have been at a 14-year low? Why are the Wall Street profits and bonuses at record highs while the real median household income stagnates at 1998 levels? Why do 98% of incumbent politicians get reelected when congressional approval levels are lower than whale shit? Why are oil prices 4 times higher than they were in 2003 if the U.S. is supposedly on the verge of energy independence? Why do corporate-controlled mainstream media choose to entertain and regurgitate government propaganda rather than inform, investigate, and seek the truth? Why do corporations and shadowy billionaires control the politicians, media, judges, and financial system in their ravenous quest for more riches? Why has the public allowed its privately owned bank to control our currency and inflate away 96% of the value in 100 years? Why have American parents allowed their children to be programmed and dumbed down by government and run by public schools? Why have Americans allowed themselves to be lured into debt by in an effort to appear wealthy and successful? Why have Americans permitted their brains to atrophy through massive doses of social media, reality TV, gadget addiction, and cultural environment of narcissism? Why have Americans lost their desire to read, think critically, question authority, act responsibly, defer gratification, and care about future generations? Why have Americans sacrificed their freedoms, liberties, and rights for the false expectation of safety and security? Why will they pay dearly for our delusional, materialistic debt finance idiocy? Because we never learned the lessons of history. There are so many questions and no truthful answer forthcoming. Those who pass for leaders in this increasingly totalitarian world are willful ignorance, apathy, hubris, and ignorance. Arrogance will have consequences. Just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it's not going to happen. The cyclicity of history guarantees a further deepening of this crisis. The world has evolved from totalitarian hegemony to Republican liberty and regressed back to totalitarianism throughout the centuries. Anyone honestly assessing the current state of the world in our country and world unequivocally conclude we have regressed back towards a totalitarian regime with a small cabal of powerful oligarchs because they control and manipulate the masses in their gluttonous desire for treasure. Aldous Huxley foretold all the indicators of a world descending into totalitarianism due to overpopulation, propaganda, brainwashing, consumerism, and dumbing down of a distracted populace in his 1958 reassessment of his 1931 novel, Brave New World. Is there a limit? Is his quote, "At the rate of increase prevailing the birth of Christ and the death of Queen Elizabeth I, it took 16 centuries for the population of the earth to double. At the present rate, it will double in less than half a century. It is fantastically rapid doubling of our numbers will be taking place on a planet whose most desirable and productive areas are already densely populated, whose soils are being eroded by the frantic efforts of bad farmers to raise more food, and whose easily available mineral capital is being squandered with the reckless extravagance of a drunken sailor getting rid of his accumulated pay." That's what Aldous Huxley did on his Brave New World Revisited 1958. Demographics are easily extrapolate and arrive at an accurate prediction as long as the existing conditions and trends remain relatively constant. Huxley was accurate in his doubling prediction. The world population was 2.9 billion in 1958. It took 39 years to double again to 5 billion in 1997. It has grown to 24% in the last 17 years to the current 7.2. According to the United Nations projections, world population projected to reach 9.6 billion in 2015. The fact it would take approximately 70 years for the world's population to double from the 1997 level reveals a slowing growth rate. As the death rates in many developed countries surpassed their birth rate, the population of the U.S. grew from 175 million in 1958 to 320 million. Today, an 80% increase in 56 years. The rapid population growth over the last century from approximately 1.8 billion in 1914, despite two horrific wars, is attributed to cheap, easy-to-access oil and advances in a medical technology made possible by access to cheap oil. The projection of 9.6 billion in 2050 is based upon an assumption the world's energy, food, and water resources can sustain that many people. No world wars kill a few 100 million people. No incurable diseases spread across the globe, and there is no catastrophic geologic climate or planetary event. I'll take the under on this 9.6 billion. Anyone viewing the increasingly violent world situation without bias can already see the strain that overpopulation has created. These 6 countries contain half the world's population, and I have the photo right here. This is from the United Nations, and it says U.S. United States 320 million, Brazil 200 million, Pakistan 182 million, India 1.3 billion, China 1.4 billion, and Indonesia 250 million. Has some interesting stats there. A cursory examination of population trends around the world provides a frightening glimpse into a totalitarian future marked by vicious resource wars, violent upheaval, and starvation for millions. India, a country 1/3 of the size of the United States, has 4 times the population of the United States. A vast swath of the population lives in poverty and squalor. India contains the largest concentration of 25% of the people living below the World Bank's international poverty line of $1.25 per day. According to the UN, India is expected to add 400 million people to its cities by 2050. Its capital city, Delhi, already ranks as the second largest in the world with 25 million inhabitants. The city has more than doubled in size since 1990. The assumption in these UN projections are flawed. Without rapidly expanding economic growth, capital formation, and energy resources, the ability to employ, house, feed, clothe, transport, and sustain 400 million more people will be impossible. Disease, starvation, civil unrest, war, and totalitarian government will be the result. Within its mortal enemy, Pakistan, already the 6th most populated country in the world, jamming 182 million people into an area 1/4 the size of India and 1/12 the size of the U.S. and growing faster than India over resources and space will be inevitable. And both countries have nuclear arms. More than half the globe's inhabitants now live in urban areas, with China, India, Nigeria forecast to see the most urban growth over the next 30 years. 24 years ago, there are 10 megacities with population pushing above the 10 million mark. Today, there are 28 megacities with areas of developing nations seeing faster growth. 16 in Asia, 4 in Latin America, 3 in Africa, 3 in Europe, and 2 in North America. The world is expected to have 41 sprawling megacities over the next few decades, with developing nations representing the majority of that growth. Today, Tokyo, with 38 million, is the largest in the world. And you know what? I have to attest to that. That is one crowded city. I've been there in 97, but it looks like it was like under 30 million. Now it's 38. Go figure. Wow. Followed by New Delhi, Jakarta, Seoul, Shanghai, Beijing, Manila, and Karachi, exceeding 20 million people. To highlight the rapid growth of the developing world, the New York metropolitan area containing 18 million was ranked as the third largest urban area in the world in 1990. Today is ranked 9th and expected to be ranked 14th by 2013. The U.S. has the fewest births since 1998, last year at 3.95 million. We also have the highest record of deaths in history at 2.54 million. The fertility rate for 20 to 24 is now 83.1 births per 1,000 women, a record low. That combination created a gap in the births over deaths that is the lowest it has been in 35 years. The plight of the developed world, U.S., Europe, and Japan, and even China, due to one-child policy. According to the UN report, the population developed regions will remain largely unchanged at around 1.3 billion from now until 2050. In contrast, the 49 least developed countries are projected to double in size from around 900 million people in 2013 to 1.8 billion in 2050. Rapid growth are desperately poor. Third world countries like Nigeria, Afghanistan, Niger, Congo, Ethiopia, and Uganda will create tremendous strain on their economic, political, social, and infrastructural systems. Nigeria's population is projected to surpass the U.S. by 2050. Japan, Europe, and Russia are in demographic death spirals. China is neutral, and the U.S. is expected to grow by another 89 million. I wonder how many of them BLS will classify as not as a labor force. And they have everything read out here about population growth. And it says here, like, they expect the United States to be up 28%, Mexico 32%, Brazil 18%, Nigeria 176%, Kenya 138%, India 34%, China 2%, Japan will decline to 15%, excuse me. Russia, they expect it to drop to 16%, and Germany 13%. What are the implications to mankind and the world adding another billion people in the next 12 years, primarily in the poorest country of Asia, Africa, and South America? What does the world think of the U.S., which constitutes 4.4% of the world's population, but consumes 20% of the world's oil production and 24% of the world's food? Will there be consequences to having 85 richest people on Earth accumulate as much as wealth as the poorest of 3.5 billion, with 2.5 billion surviving on less than $1.25 a day? Can a planet with a finite amount of easily accessible, financially viable, extractable resources support an ever-increasing number of people? Is there a limit to growth? I believe these questions will be answered in the next 15 years as the dire consequences play out in civil strife, resource wars, totalitarian regimes, and societal collapse, forth-turning crisis. Cycles always sweeping away the existing social order and replace it with something new. It could be far better or far worse. Impact of overpopulation is a quote from Huxley again. The problem of rapidly increasing numbers in relation to natural resources, to social stability, and to well-being of individuals. This is now the central problem of mankind, and it will remain a central problem certainly for another century and perhaps several centuries thereafter. Unsolved, that problem will render unsolvable all other problems. Worse still, it will create conditions in which individual freedom and social decencies of the democratic way of life will become impossible, almost unthinkable. Not all dictatorships arise in the same way. There are many roads to brave new world, but perhaps the straightest and broadest of them is the road we are traveling today, the road that leads through gigantic numbers and accelerating increases. And we will continue. The turmoil, roiling the world today is a function of Huxley's supposition that overpopulation pushes societies towards centralization and ultimately totalitarianism. The relentless growth in the world's population not matched by growth in energy, resources, water and food and living space results in increasing tension, anger, economic decline, government dependency, war, and ultimately totalitarianism. Huxley believed politicians and governments would increasingly resort to propaganda and misinformation to mislead citizens as the problem worsened and freedoms were revoked. Could this recent statement by our commander-in-chief of propaganda have made Edward Bernays and Joseph Goebbels any prouder? Good book, too, by Ed Bernays, Propaganda. The world, this is a quote that says, the world is less violent than it has ever been, is healthier than it has been, is more tolerant than it has ever been, it's been better fed and it's better than it's ever been, it's been more educated than it's ever been. I'm sure people living in Gaza, the Ukraine, Libya, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Thailand, Turkey, Africa, and American urban ghettos could concur with Obama's less violence ever mantra. Disease, cholera, malaria, hepatitis, AIDS, tuberculosis, Ebola, plague, SARS, which is SARS, and malnutrition beset third world countries, while the U.S. obesity epidemic caused by consumption of corporate processed foods peddled to the masses through diabolical marketing methods enriches the megacorporate food companies, as well as the corporate sick care complex. Religious wars and culture wars rage across the world as intolerance for others' beliefs reaches all-time highs. After 3 decades of government control of public education, they have succeeded in dumbing down the masses through social engineering, propaganda, and promoting equality over excellence. Obama should stop trying to think and stick what he does best, golf and fundraising. After reading his drivel, I'm reminded of a far more pertinent quote from Huxley. It is quote here: "Facts do not cease to exist, but they are ignored," unquote. The charts below details the fact that 12% of the world's population in countries producing 9% of the world's oils are currently in a state of war. Violence, war, civil unrest roiling in Ukraine, Syria, Egypt, Libya, Iraq, and Afghanistan are a direct result of U.S. meddling, instigation, and provocation. The U.S. government funds dictators Hussein, Mubarak, Assad, and Gaddafi until they no longer serve their interests. Engineer the overthrow of democratically elected leaders in countries, Iran, Egypt, Ukraine, that don't toe the line and dole out in billions in military aid and arms to countries around the world in an effort to make them do our dirty work and enrich the military-industrial complex. The true motivation behind most of the violence, intrigue, and war is the need. U.S. need to maintain the U.S. petrodollar hegemony. Yeah, I gotta pronounce that. I'll find out soon. And to control the flow of oil and natural gas throughout the world. Ruling oligarchies' power, influence, and wealth are dependent upon dictating currency valuations and flow of oil and gas from foreign fiefdoms. And you have the map of that too, with all the facts and information. We'll go on. In Huxley's 1931 Brave New World fable, the world's population is maintained at an optimum level, just under 2 billion, circulated by those in control. This is done through technology and biological manipulation. Procreation through sexual intercourse is prohibited. Creation of desired number of people in each class is scientifically determined, and the classes are conditioned from birth to fulfill their roles in society. When Huxley reassessed in his novel 1958 Brave New World Revisited, he didn't argue for an optimum level of population. He simply hypothesized, a closed correlation between too many people multiplying too rapidly and the formulation of authoritarian philosophies and rise of totalitarian system governments. The introduction of penicillin, DDT, and clean water into even the poorest countries on the planet had of rapidly decreasing death rates around the globe. Meanwhile, birth rates continue to increase due to religious, social, and cultural taboos surrounding birth control and the illiteracy and ignorance of those in the poorest regions in the world. The ultimate result has been an explosion in population growth in the developing world, least able to sustain that growth. Huxley just uses common sense in concluding that as an ever-growing population presses more heavily upon accessible resources, the economic position of the society undergoing this ordeal becomes ever more precarious. It is essentially comes down to the laws of economics. Most of the developing world is economic basket cases. They cannot produce foods, consumer goods, housing, schools, infrastructure, teachers, managers, scientists, or educated workers at the same rate as the population growth. Therefore, it is impossible to improve the wretched condition of the vast majority as they wallow in squalor unless the country can produce more than it consumes. It cannot generate the surplus capital needed to invest in machinery, agricultural production, manufacturing facilities, and education. The rapidly growing population sinks further into poverty and despair. Huxley grasps the nefarious implications for freedom and liberty as overpopulation wreaks havoc around the globe. And it says here, this quote by Huxley: whenever the economic life of a nation becomes precarious, the central government is forced to assume additional responsibilities for the general welfare. It must work out elaborate plans for dealing with a critical situation. It must impose ever greater restrictions upon the activities of the subjects, and if, as is very likely, worsening economic conditions result in political unrest or open rebellion, then central government must intervene to preserve public order and its own authority. More and more power is thus concentrated in the hands of the executives and their bureaucratic managers. Unquote. Despots, dictators, and power-hungry presidents arise in an atmosphere of fear, scarce resources, hopelessness, and misery. As the power of central government grows, the freedoms, liberties, and rights of the people are diminished and ultimately ruined. In Part 2, I'll examine our relentless path towards totalitarianism and war. And he does have this available, and I'm going to actually add it to the post in good faith, because it is a lot of interesting stuff. And how I look at this too, and Mr. Quinn can attest to it, this is an actual New World Order agenda. Have everything centralized and make us go to them for our problems and solutions. It's like the Hegelian theory. Kio bono, who benefits? Problem, reaction, solution. So it's very disturbing, and you have to always look at it in a bigger picture. They want to say capitalism, they want to say socialism, they want to say communism. This is totalitarianism. New World Order 101. That's how I look at it, my friends. But I will add that post for part 2 to this site as well, to my Spreaker page. So you have a good look at it, because I'm going to read a little bit more on this as well. But it's very interesting, so I will give this man a lot of credit. Burningplatform.com, but I will post this on my Spreaker page, so don't sweat it. And finally, I'm going to see how I'm looking here. Oh yeah, okay, good. A little over an hour. This came out yesterday. It's from shtfplan.com. It's entitled Hotel California, LA officials to send homeless to internment camps will be planning with RFID chips. It's written by Maxavo. As it reads here, the anonymous source claiming to work inside the Los Angeles Department of Health Services recently dropped a bombshell that could set a dangerous new precedent in how the government deals with those they find to be a burden or threat to a stable society. In a report penned by Paul Joseph Watson, the whistleblower says that Los Angeles County is preparing to round up and forcibly house homeless citizens in detention facilities referred to internally by department employees as FEMA camps. Though the source says they have been instructed to refer to the detention areas as low-cost housing facilities. Can we say attempt to con the con man? According to the source, law enforcement teams will soon be rounding up homeless individuals on the streets, checking them into the facilities and detaining them indefinitely for their own health and safety. What may be even more alarming, however, is that the government is reportedly planning on embedding these individuals with RFID chips, presumably to track their whereabouts. Can we say 1984? And right here, the program is focused around removing or relocating homeless people from the streets of downtown LA, starting with Skid Row. We will approach them on the street asking if they need or want help, usually offering food to get their direct attention. If they come into the office, to make our jobs twice as efficient, said the supervisor. Alright, so it's a blackmail there. I'm not afraid to say it. In most cases, the decision is already made for them unless they become combative or belligerent, in which case we send them for a 72-hour psych evaluation and then transfer them while under sedation or heavy medication to the facility. The supervisor stressed that the program would be humane, that it would help clean up the streets, and that the citizens being processed into housing units will receive medical treatment and RFID chip, room and board, but they cannot leave. The supervisor elaborated that the facility was not a prison, but that its population would be kept there for their own health and safety. The whistleblower points to a page on the Department of Health and Services official website, which is a link to that, which details a roving teams will help provide short-term housing with health oversights to homeless DHS patients who are recovering from an acute illness or injury or have conditions that would be exacerbated by living in the streets or in shelters. The full report's at InfoWars, so you can look at it and observe responsibly. Many Americans will no doubt support these facilities because it will clean up their neighborhoods, making them safer and eliminating an eyesore. They won't even blink about people being forcibly rounded up, drugged, and detained and tracked like animals, so as long as it happens out of view of their utopia. The government will, no doubt, hail the successes of such a program and will likely look to expand to other cities and perhaps even larger segments of the population. One hypothetical scenario that could be imagined is that as more and more dangerous individuals are added to domestic terror watch lists, the government will look to intern suspected terrorists and their associates and in such facilities for their own health and safety, of course. The White House recently approved a substantial expansion of terrorist watch list. Hooray for my Lord and Savior, Barack Obama. A substantial expansion of terrorist watch list, which is a link, which already boasts a threat list that includes hundreds of thousands of Americans under the recently declassified guidelines. Being added to the watch list requires no concrete facts or refutable evidence, so you can assume will make an ass out of you and me. I will proceed. The guidelines go so far as to grant broad powers to the White House administration officials to unilaterally add not only individuals but entire categories of people to the list. One possible future envisions a scenario where specific categories of people are identified as dangerous to the public, like the homeless are rounded up for the internment. The dangers of such facilities and by the means by which they will be populated, if this is the actual plan in Los Angeles, are a blaring warning sign that should be heeded by all Americans. To paraphrase the poem by Martin Niemöller about the cowardice of Germans in the face of mass roundup. When they came from the homeless, I did not speak out because I was not homeless. And you can link that quote in its entirety because this is what's been going on. It has something similar has happened in 1941 or 42, which was signed by President Roosevelt, Executive Order 1966, that rounded up any Americans are considered a dangerous threat, and it's mainly non-combatants. They consider themselves terrorists or combatants, mostly with Japanese Americans, Germans, and Italians. Okay, many of them were never even been to those countries, but they were rounded up and put in these camps. 1966, revisit it. And I'll try to, I'm going to add that to my memo on Executive Order 9066. so I can have all you folks understand it, just in case if you're other parts of the country or the world. I'm going to put that in there right now. But this is very scary, my friends, and that's why I've been saying and stressing this for a good period of time. The war on terror is a conflagration with ourselves. So that's how I see it. Let me just, looks like something stopped here. Might have to just do a little revise. Excuse me. Boom. Boom. But the fact is, this is very dangerous. And people, those people that support it need to be thrown in prison for treason. Due process. In the United States, treason could be death by hanging. And that's all I have to say. And a little more addition with the homeless, they may be used to round up people too. Alright? So always observe that more thoroughly. Alright, my friends. I'd like to thank everyone for listening in. It's very nice. It's been a while. I've been doing this a little bit periodically, so I want to try to do a little more episodes as soon as possible. And you could hit your comments, recommendations, criticisms on my Facebook, Twitter, Google+. I have, what's the other one I have? Good grief. I have so many, I'm sorry. But I want to try to hit World Truth as well, RTR, which is Restore the Republic, social media, and Free Speak. I want to try to put all those in there as soon as possible with my links and all that. But my Spreaker page will be perfect. You can hit your comments there because I have a little bit more access to it. All right. And I do thank you for listening. As my closing signature, demoniac resistance is healthy for the soul and can liberate societies. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Keep on spreading the love, and may your guardian spirits be with you.